Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle, and this is part 3 of our PJTV in-depth interview with Dinesh D'Souza, remarkable academic, best-selling author, and filmmaker behind the movies 2016 Obama's America and America, Imagine a World Without Her, two terrific documentaries. He's got a new book out called Stealing America, and that's what we've been talking about with him in our first two segments. The first one talked about his time during the trial, realizing that the government was coming after him for reasons other than the small crime that he committed. And in part 2, we talked a little bit about what life in the detention center was like. But today we're going to talk about the main thrust of the book. So, Dinesh, thanks again for joining us here. Once you get past the trial and the life in the detention center, you pose a question, which is the question. I thought it was just beautifully, beautifully phrased. I never thought about it quite this clearly before. But you asked the question, since thieves try to steal things, what is the most valuable thing there is? What is the most valuable thing in the world? And as it turns out, it's the private property held by individual citizens in the United States of America. As I recall from memory, that number is about $71 trillion. That's a pretty big pot of money, $71,000 billion. So if you've got people with a criminal mentality and you want to go after the real money, it's one thing to hold up a bank, but if you can hold up the Federal Reserve System and hold up the ability to print money, now you're getting to the real case. So your book is based on the idea that you learned from these street criminals who are constantly running scams that it mimics the criminal behavior, or rather that you had the insight that you could look at national politics as a form of criminal behavior.
Yes, and as a form of theft. Now, it might be legal theft in that you might be able to use the mechanisms of the democratic process in order to appropriate wealth. For example, let's say that you were able to get 51% of citizens in this country to pass a law to confiscate the entire wealth of the remaining 49%. That would be a democratic decision, a majority rule, and but it's legal in that sense. Now, it's unconstitutional. The Constitution just does not give the government that kind of power, but the progressives have never let that stop them. So they appeal to democracy, they appeal to equality, they put out this moral aroma, a squid-like cloud of rhetoric, which is war for social justice, and then they engage in mass-scale piracy. I mean, under Obama, we've seen the federal government, not just that he controls that $3 trillion pot of wealth, but federal control over banks, insurance companies, investment houses, automobile companies, so Obama can fire the CEO of a big company. Now they're moving into the energy sector. They've already taken the healthcare sector. Education is next. So this is the government, i.e. the progressives in government, getting their tentacles, their claws onto a huge ocean of private wealth, and they get to control it. The private entrepreneurs can create it, but the progressives get to allocate it.
That's right, the makers and the takers. That's exactly right. If they pass a law allowing the theft, it's still theft. It's just legalized theft. So if you could put it in a nutshell, what's the Obama scam? I mean, what's in it for him? What's the Obama scam? In very broad strokes, how does the Obama scam work?
So let's take an example, which is Obamacare. Obamacare is a perfect example of a classic scam. Now again, if I was writing about this a couple of years ago, I would have looked at Obamacare. Here's a healthcare proposal. Let's look at the incentives and disincentives. Is it too costly? Blah, 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 blah. But let's look at it as a scam. So Obama goes to the American people and he goes, listen, check out these fat cat insurance companies. There's just a whole lot of dough sitting with those guys. Let's you and me figure out how to get it. Let's go and make them do things they would not otherwise do. For example, you've already got a pre-existing health condition. Now, normally you can't get insurance for the same reason you can't get fire insurance if your house is already on fire.
Correct.
Right? But let's make him do that stuff. So you give me power and I'll go get them. And a lot of the American people go, okay, Obama, you go get them. Then Obama goes to the insurance companies, and here's where the plot thickens. He shuts the door, and he turns off the microphones, and he goes, okay, guys, here's the deal. I want more power over you. You're not going to like that, federal control. But I'm going to force millions of Americans who don't want insurance, don't want to buy it, don't want to pay for it, but I'm going to make them pay for it. That's millions of new customers for you, hundreds of millions of dollars of profits. So you have an incentive to team up with me to get this done and buy ads to promote it. So Obamacare is marketed as a scheme, me, Obama, and the American people conning the insurance companies. In fact, it's Obama and the insurance companies conning the American people, because that's where the money is. So that's a really good example of how healthcare, again, it's all smuggled in the language of people need to afford healthcare, the poor guy who can't have healthcare. But the reality is, here are the progressives. How do we get a hold of 1/6 of the U.S. economy? Here's our scam. Here's how we did it.
hey, insurance companies, that's a nice bank account you got there. Sure would be a shame if something happened to it. Right? He's got the coercive power of legislation. It's not a question of intimidation through threats and violence as you'd see on the streets. If you want to get to the real heist, the real larceny, 5, 6 orders of magnitude above street crime, 7, 8 orders of magnitude above street crime, maybe 10 or 11 even, for God's sakes. We're talking about trillions of dollars, 12 zeros behind it. In order to do that kind of larceny, you have to have the power of legislation. You have to have the coercive power of the government in order to steal that kind of money.
And you need to have powerful coalitions that support you. Coalitions in the media, coalitions in academia. Remember, you're not directly paying those people. You can't give them a financial incentive. For a long time, it puzzled me why those guys would collaborate in the theft. And I think the reason is that they do it for the same reason that the poor white guy who had no slaves fought in the Confederate side in the Civil War. Because there was a psychic reward of being part of a racial hierarchy where even if you're a stupid, ignorant guy who's accomplished nothing, you get to be higher on the totem pole than the most educated black guy.
That's right.
Right? So similarly, the ordinarily academic scribbler is a nobody in the capitalist system because people are creating wealth. This guy is writing his nonsense. But under Obama says, I'm going to make you an important person. You're going to become a planner. You're going to be assisting in the process of government. So there's a psychic elevation of otherwise useless people, and this excites them, and this is why they're willing to collaborate with this larcenous enterprise.
And these big businesses also do a financial calculation, right? They basically say, look, we could fight this. It's the same kind of calculation they do with a frivolous lawsuit. They basically say, we could fight this, we could put all this money into fighting it. If we lose, we've got a huge loss, or we could take the smaller penalty, which is still stealing from us, but it's the sure thing. Let's just go ahead and do it that way.
This is why Saul Alinsky, the mentor, said of millionaires that they would be willing to subsidize a revolution on Saturday in which they'd make a profit on Sunday, even though they were sure to be executed on Monday.
Yeah, he's got it down. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton, the presumptive Democratic Party nominee. There's no question that she's broken federal laws, felonies. I don't get the feeling she's going to be doing prison time. We'll come back to that in a minute. But if Hillary Clinton and the history of the Clinton Foundation and all this stuff going back to Whitewater and the cattle futures and all of this stuff, if this woman is this corrupt out of power, what on earth do you think is going to happen to this country and that giant pot of $71 trillion of wealth if somebody like that actually assumes the presidency?
Well, I have a grudging admiration for Hillary for the same reason I had a grudging admiration for Don Corleone. It's the ability to amass this, to pull this off. So with Hillary, I think the remarkable thing is we've had corruption in American politics at the local level. Tammany Hall rackets going on in New York City, the Daily Machine in Chicago, but no one before has figured out how to become Secretary of State and use that to profit globally. This is taking Tammany Hall to the global level. How do I get money out of uranium in Kazakhstan? How do I make money in Libya? How do I profit Canadian billionaires who have interests in African minerals? How do I make money in Haiti? In Haiti, you think there's no money in Haiti, but there is money in Haiti. Of course, it's aid money that's pouring in, some of it from the US government. So Hillary figured out, okay, if I make Bill, if Bill can be the UN guy for dispensing the aid and I'm Secretary of State, then you've got a marvelous sort of Bonnie and Clyde operation going on here. The Clintons interpose themselves between this great flow of aid and the poor Haitians, and not surprisingly, a good deal of the aid kind of disappears en route, and then you have Haitians protesting outside the Clinton Foundation. You've stolen billions. Where's our money? How come the roads still aren't fixed in Haiti? People still have cholera. So the ingenuity of the Clintons is they figured out not just how to make money on rich people, they know how to make money on poor people.
Yeah, and when you were talking about the uranium example, let's say I've got a bunch of uranium in Sweden, I'm having a problem selling it. I don't bribe the Secretary of State. Goodness knows that would be illegal and wrong. So what I do is I make a $5 or $10 million donation to the Clinton Foundation. Bill Clinton comes, makes a speech. Let's say I pay him $2 million. Next thing you know, somehow mysteriously, the trade laws, which are the purview of the Secretary of State, are altered slightly and bans are lifted. It's no longer considered whatever. Strings are pulled behind the scenes and you've got a shell company just like any other criminal enterprise.
Now, this is what's so remarkable, and I think it's where Hillary made an innovation beyond Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky was a racketeer. He learned a lot of his tactics at the hands of the Al Capone mob. He talks about how he loved the fact that they were able to extract money out of people in shakedowns, but he also noticed that they sometimes got knocked off. So he thought, how can I do this without getting knocked off? And the answer is politics. But Alinsky always thought you had to do it from the outside. You had to go to a corporation from the outside, Jesse Jackson style, and shake them down, or go to government and do the same thing. Hillary figured out, what if I get on the inside? What if I can then turn all the agencies of government, the FEC, the FBI, the IRS, the FEC, I'll make all of those, in a sense, my enforcement apparatus.
The muscle.
So then you have intimidation from the inside. That, to me, far more terrifying.
Just off the book, very briefly, do you think she's going to, do you think the FBI is going to bring charges? And if they do you think the Justice Department will pursue them?
I think that's the big question. I think the FBI is
they're
going to do a serious investigation, but remember, this is going to ultimately end up with Loretta Lynch, an Obama appointee. The reason Obama's been able to be so lawless himself, who's going to bring the indictment against him? I think Hillary is counting that that's not going to happen.
One final thing on this giant form of larceny. You know, you were prosecuted for campaign contribution irregularities that totaled maybe $30,000, a few tens of thousands of dollars. But every single year, the progressives and the liberals pump about $1 trillion into their campaigns. And the way they do it is they take tax money from working Americans and push it out in the form of entitlements, which gets them Democratic votes. It's a vote pump of about $1 trillion a year in terms of entitlements that are raised through taxes or through debt and given to people in order to get their vote. I mean, you want to talk about campaign irregularities. We are in an era now. You said it's unconstitutional. You're absolutely right. Money needs to be raised for the general welfare, which means you can't take money from one person and give it to somebody else. That's where the real campaign irregularities and corruption is, right?
I agree, and I also think it's always shameful to me. You know, when I was at Dartmouth, I'd look at all these different college buildings, and they were named Lord and Streeter Hall, and I thought there must be some wealthy philanthropist who made a lot of money, who gave this building out of their hard-earned money. But now you drive around West Virginia, and you see the Robert Byrd Highway, and the Robert Byrd Medical Center, and the Robert Byrd this, and the Robert Byrd that. But the point is, Robert Byrd didn't earn 1 cent that caused any of that to be built. He actually appropriated taxpayer money to get all these things done, and yet he achieves a kind of immortality by putting his stupid name over all these things, so that, as if to say, I, Robert Byrd, did this. No, you didn't do it. You lifted it off the pockets of the taxpayer, and you're taking their credit and putting your name on it.
That's exactly right. It's funny you mentioned Robert Byrd. I did an afterburner about him not too long ago, and while I was talking, it was 200. It was 200 as the Robert Byrd rest area on the freeway. You know, it's just raw ego. Well, look, it looks like the worst is over for you. You certainly seem happy and healthy. You look like life is really improving for you. It would have to, I guess. What's next for you? What have you got coming up?
Well, I've got the book Stealing America out now, and I'm making a big movie for next summer to come out probably the week of the Democratic Convention. It's a secret history of progressivism, Hillary, and the Democratic Party. It's going to be a movie that's going to be quite an eye-opener.
And you seem happy personally as well.
I am. I'm engaged to be married next March. My personal life is going very well. And I've learned a thing or two. I've tried to take these lemons and make some lemonade.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. You know, I was reading the history of the Civil War, and they were talking about how Lincoln had imprisoned certain people during the war. He just put them in jail. And a lot of those people were innocent, but Shelby Foote wrote a line. He said, you know, there are worse places for American patriots to be in a dungeon sometimes. So standing up for what you believe in is worth doing no matter what happens to you, I think. Well, that'll do it for this final segment of the interview. Dinesh, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for joining us. I think everybody would really benefit from picking up a copy of your book, Stealing America, and by checking out DineshD'Souza.com. I've been an enormous fan of yours for the longest time. I think you're an absolute patriot, and I think you've paid a toll for all of us. We're very, very glad that you've been here today.
Thank you.
Now, if you haven't yet, definitely check out the previous segments of this interview right here on PJTV. I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for watching.